What you gonna do when it all comes back to the place that you never wanted it to come back to? And where you gonna roll when the bottom drops out and you got no place to go? Who you gonna trust when trust is a must? You better roll with the rest of us. So pack your bags and all the faith you can, cause it's about ready to hit the fan. Come to the ready. 2012 brought about the re-election of an antichrist. Come to the ready.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Pierce Kibbe. I'm the founder and chief instructor for Practice Inc., a locally and veteran-owned business here in Lakeland, Florida. This evening, what we're going to be focusing in on is the first domain of situational awareness, and that is KINESICS, body language, right? Gestures. But before we get too much into that, I actually want to recap about yesterday's video. Okay, so we talked about the baseline, assessing the baseline of your environment. Keeping in mind that baseline can change. It can change depending on the weather, or the climate. It can change depending on the geography, right? If I'm down here in Florida and it's the middle of the summer, I'm going to dress differently than if it was up north and it was closer towards fall or the winter. I'm going to wear more layers. I'm going to have heavier jackets, sweaters, different things like that on, gloves, any sort of head covering, something like that to help keep me warm. But you have to remember that what are you looking for? You're looking for those anomalies. What isn't happening that should be, or what is happening that shouldn't be. And when you're assessing that, remember that you're looking for clusters or groups of different clues, right? You're not just looking for one thing and going, oh, the sky is falling, here it comes. No, you need to look for those clusters, those groups. And when you feel that itch on the back of your neck, or your hair is standing up, or you got that gut feeling, that sixth sense of, well, I didn't know what was going on, what was happening. It just didn't seem right. Well, that's because your subconscious, which picks up on millions of things throughout the day, but your conscious mind can only pay attention to a handful of those at a time. And now you're taking that time to stop. Remember that acronym, STOP, stop. S stands for stop. All very familiar with that, both verbally and non-verbally. T stands for think, O is for observe, and P is for plan. Now, when you're taking that into account, that is what you're trying to do. You're trying to stop and think and observe that baseline. And it can be just a very hasty assessment, a snap assessment of that baseline, and it can change. If it's an area that you're familiar with to go to all the time, you're going to have a better idea of what that assessment is, right? What that baseline is, things that fit in. The type of behaviors that fit in, the type of body language that fits in, all those different things you'll be understanding of and better capable to recognize those anomalies. So what we're going to focus on is going to be KINESICS. Now, again, my name is Pierce Kibbe, and that's just my contact information. You can go check out my website, or you can give me a call or send me a message if you have any questions. Okay, the motto is making tactical practical. And that's the focus. There's so many different things out there that are tactical, but realistically, everybody really needs the practical for the most part, and that's the purpose. So, the 6 domains of situational awareness. We touched on this at the end yesterday, but we're going to start off with KINESICS, right? That's where we're going to start off with tonight. Tomorrow is going to be biometrics. The day after is going to be proxemics, followed by geographics, iconography, and ending with atmospherics. And all this together, this compendium here, makes up and helps you better assess that baseline and look for those clusters in these different areas of what isn't happening that should be, or what is happening that shouldn't be. So KINESICS, body language. We're very used to it. Many of us have been told for a long period of time, hey, first impressions last a lifetime, right? So many of us start out as a kid. I can remember as a kid that I was always told not to stand, especially if an adult's talking to me with my arms crossed, not to look down or away or be fidgety or anything like that, right? Why? Well, because in our culture, it's disrespectful. It shows that I'm not interested, I'm not being respectful of the individual, the speaker. Okay, but remember that when we're assessing that baseline, it can change. Why? Because of the geography. If we're changing to a different culture, here in the U.S., we like our bubble, right? You hear very often, hey, stay out of my bubble. Well, that body language comes into play. Now we'll talk more about proxemics or proximity further on, but you have to remember when you're looking at other cultures, things that for them are normal and what makes you the anomaly, what makes you stick out. So you should do your own due diligence, especially if you're getting ready to travel overseas anywhere. Pay attention to, pick up on what that culture does, how they act, different things like that. And that way you don't stick out as much and you blend in a little bit better, right? And it shows that you're more respectful, because in other cultures, they don't make eye contact. They see it as a very challenging point of view. And if you're making eye contact, that's what you're doing, you're challenging, right? So in specific cultures, you don't do that. You look down. Why? Because you're being very submissive. You're recognizing that you're respecting them, but that's not by challenging them. Other cultures, again, we like our bubble. We like to keep you, especially if we don't know you, about arm's length, right? However, that's the typical social distance there, or personal distance. But when we're dealing with somebody that we know really well, we have that intimate distance, the kissing distance, okay? Not all cultures do that. A lot of them are very up close. They get very up close to you. They're very touchy, and that isn't personal. They're not trying to cause you harm. There's no ill intent there. That's just their culture. So pay attention. Wikipedia defines kinesics as the interpretation of body motion communication, such as facial expressions, gestures, nonverbal behavior related to the movement of any part of the body or the body as a whole. So what does that mean? Well, again, we've talked about the body language, but when we're talking about the body, we're talking about the head, the movement of the head, the movement of the torso, and of course the limbs, the arms and the legs. So what are the basics of kinesics? It describes the use, like we talked about, head, torso, and limbs. Understand that the interpretation of these body movements helps you to identify those who don't fit in and to better predict others' behavior based on the subtle cues, which can indicate their intentions. So as an instructor or a presenter, or somebody, if you're in a supervisory position or something like that, you have to take into account of your audience, right? So typically this is done person to person, in front of a live audience or a group of folks doing this. So there's interaction, right? So I can better judge on the audience. Are they really interested? Are they not interested? And how do I do this? On what body language? Well, I'm keeping in mind the head, right? I'm keeping in mind the torso, and I'm keeping in mind the limbs. Now, if I'm interested, what are some things that I'll do? Well, I'll actually look at you. What else? Well, I'm not going to be playing with my phone. I'm not going to be shuffling papers. I'm not going to be looking at my watch all the time or looking at the clock or the door. Why? Because I'm interested. You must have something interesting to say. Therefore, I will continue to pay attention, right? Keep in mind also, a significant amount of communication is what? It's nonverbal. Think about this. Over your course of lifetime, however long or short it may be, odds are you've gotten pretty good at being able to assess a verbal disagreement or an agreement going on, a conversation, something like that, between either two people or even a group of people. If you're around a bunch of people that you know, well, typically everybody's smiling, they're happy, they're laughing, they're showing that they're enjoying it, right? But if it's a tense situation, somebody's about to get fired, or there's just been some hard times around the house or a job or whatever, or it's very stressful, well, oh man, that tension was so thick I could cut it with a knife. Why? What made you think that? Because you're reading that body language. You're reading how that individual is standing there. If you've ever watched somebody about ready to fight, or you yourself have been in that position that you're about ready to fight, what do you oftentimes see? Somebody standing there, their fists are clenched, they start to get louder. Why? Because they're posturing. They're trying to make themselves bigger or louder or close in for territorial reasons, to close in on you and to get you to back down in hopes that they don't have to fight, right? Because what they found, scientists have conducted studies, and what they found is overall, most human beings and animal kinds are the same. They don't really like to fight. So while you've heard fight, flight, freeze, the other ones in there are going to be posture or submit. Now that posture, you remember, that can be bullying, different things like that, but I'm going to get louder and I'm going to get closer and bigger. I'm going to expand that chest out, right? In hopes that maybe you'll back down so we don't have to go further past this. Well, you have to be able to read that. and you've been probably doing it for quite a while. So it's nothing new to you, but you have to stop and observe it to recognize it first. And now you are going, oh, well, yeah, I knew something was going on. I couldn't quite pick up on it. But now that you mention that, yeah, you're right. Well, that's because you were reading the body language. You want to look for multiple clues or groups or clusters of all those different things that you're seeing, the cues, right? So you're not just going to want to focus on one thing and suddenly go, oh my gosh, the sky is falling, this is it. No, you want to look for clusters or groups of different signs based on the 6 domains of situational awareness. So when you're looking at that, you're assessing the distance in between people, you're assessing the body language, you know, the atmosphere. How is everybody? Are they joking? Are they happy? Are they sad? Are they mad? You know, all those different things is what you're assessing. And you can do it very quickly. It just takes time. And as you're doing that, you're going to want to establish the same thing with these body language gestures of, are they dominant or non-dominant? Are they uncomfortable or are they comfortable? Are they interested or non-interested? Well, what does that mean? Well, let's talk about it, right? So dominant versus non-dominant. We talked about posturing. We talked about bullying, being very territorial and being very loud. Most of us have seen it. Some have experienced. Others of us may have done it. So you've got a pretty good understanding of what that typically looks like or sounds like. What's non-dominant? Non-dominant is being submissive, right? Looking down or away, no eye contact, you're hunched over, you're attempting to appear smaller. Why? Because you're submitting. Okay, you're not really wanting to fight for whatever reason, and then you're just submitting. You're not trying to posture and make yourself larger, you're trying to make yourself smaller. You're not making eye contact. Yes, sir, I'm sorry. Think about if you've ever been chewed out at work, or you know somebody else has been chewed out at work. You know, typically if they're standing up there and they're getting in the boss's face going, you don't talk to me like that, they probably will not be working there anymore. But if they're very submissive and, yes, sir, I realize that, you know, that was a bad decision and I'm really sorry, it won't happen again. That's submitting. Why? Doesn't mean that they're giving in. It just means that based on that situation, they're realizing that posturing or leading to a possible fight is not worth it. Uncomfortable versus comfortable. Now these are all, like I said, done in front of an audience typically, and I like to do the interested versus not interested when it comes to ladies who are trying to deflect intentions or being hit on from guys, right? They got a pretty good idea of how to tell you that they're not interested. And it's always interesting to hear stories, as opposed to interested. Okay? Same thing with uncomfortable versus comfortable, or dominant versus non-dominant. But typically the last two are the more popular ones to go back and forth with. So uncomfortable versus comfortable. Odds are by this time, depending on your age, you've been in uncomfortable situations and you've been in very comfortable situations. Whether you're a tourist in a different land, an area, a different culture, something like that, you've probably been uncomfortable to some degree, right? Or if you're at the house, that's typically one of the areas that you're most comfortable. That's your domain, that's your castle. So you're going to kick back, relax, put your feet up on the sofa or the table or whatever. But you're not typically going to go do that at somebody else's house. So what's uncomfortable? Well, twitching, constant moving of body or limbs, twiddling the thumbs, tapping, you know, somebody's got that pen and they're constantly clicking it and driving you nuts. Constant shifting or blinking, rapid breathing, or they're oriented towards the door. Now, when we're talking about that, remember we're focusing on the torso, we're focusing on the head, and we're focusing on the limbs. So if you were in front of me and we were trying to assess the body language of the audience, if I see you oriented towards like this, or more importantly, if you're here and I'm trying to present to you and I'm oriented like this, hey, it's not comfortable, right? Most of us do not stand like this on a daily basis. What is that signaling non-verbally? It's signaling, or possibly signaling, that I'm ready to go. What are other clues that I could be looking for? Am I constantly checking my watch or my phone? Am I constantly checking the clock? You know, am I constantly twitching, you know, trying to get up and motion kind of towards the door, anything like that? Or if I'm comfortable, I should be oriented towards you, right? My lower body should be oriented towards you. And I shouldn't be standing up here talking to you guys like this, or looking down or away or anything like that, right? That would show that I'm uncomfortable. But if I'm comfortable, a very relaxed posture, you're very calm, even breathing, and you're mirroring or mimicking the speaker. Now, typically on podiums, you hear the power poses where people brace themselves up on the podiums and different things like that, or they wear in the power ties, all the different things that come into the body language. Well, one of the really interesting ones is mirroring or mimicking. So if you've never seen it, there's a TV show called Brain Games, and it's actually on Netflix, and they've done a lot of really interesting studies and tested a lot of different things. And one of them they did was on mirroring or mimicking. And what they ended up doing is taking a group of subjects, test subjects, and they had them go into a room and sit down in front of a computer. And on that computer they were looking at was a face looking at them. And they started out with the face was very stern, just really no emotion at all, no interaction. And what they didn't know is that there was actually a real person that face was for in front of another computer with a camera faced at them. And that individual's job the first time is here they're reading off the script, asking questions, talking about different things, and that person the whole time just is. So if I stood up here and did that for a while, obviously you would move on to another video or somebody else, right? But what they did test after that, and after they talked to all the different test subjects, is, hey, what were your thoughts? How is this? How did that make you feel? That kind of thing. Then they send it back through there. Exact same person on the other end. But this time, the individual, as they're telling and talking about their story and reading their script, what is it that's going on? Well, that individual on the other end is actually reacting to them and mimicking them. If they're telling something funny, that face is doing the same thing. It's mimicking them or mirroring them. And it was really interesting to see and hear their different interpretations of how that made them feel, what they were thinking between the first time and this time. So if you ever get a chance, go ahead and watch that episode. I will try to link it in to this video presentation when I post it, all right? And interested versus non-interested. This is one that typically gets very interesting, right? So leaning in, closing the distance or the proximity, and oriented towards the speaker. Well, that's interested, right? If I'm turned towards you, if I'm leaning in, typically that's not just because it's a loud place. Now it can be, but it means because I'm really trying to listen to you. And that's one of those speaking techniques, right? If I start off by talking loud and then bring it down a little bit more, and then say, okay, well, what we really want to talk about is interested versus non-interested. Well, typically what you're going to actually have to do is lean in, right? You're going to, oh, what is he saying? Well, and that's a trick that speakers typically use, is if they're trying to get your attention or something that's really important, they're going to either bring it up and adjust their pitch and their tone, or they're going to bring it down to really make you have to listen. And if you got a crowd that's getting a little bit unruly, you can work with that in different things, right? What about non-interested? Talked about it. Constantly checking the watch, the phone, the exit. And what are you doing? You're not making eye contact, right? Now, again, keep in mind, this can vary depending on the culture, the geography, different things like that. But you have to be able to assess that baseline, and hopefully you did your own due diligence, right? So those are just indicators of the kinesics for folks that are those gestures that you're paying attention to and looking for those clusters or groups of clues. Are they dominant versus non-dominant? Are they uncomfortable? Or are they comfortable? Are they interested? Or are they non-interested? Tomorrow night, we're going to talk about biometric cues, all right? So please feel free, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them, comment on them, anything. Like I said before, as an instructor, I'm also a student. So I can only make these better with your assistance. So I look forward to talking with you more and continuing to present this series as we go. Like I said, it is a 7-part series on the 6 domains of situational awareness. And this is the actual first domain of kinesics or body language. So have a good night, and remember Proverbs 22:3 of New Living Translation says, the prudent person foresees danger and takes precautions. The simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. Who do you want to be?